Little did I realize yesterday when I got on that plane in Houston, Texas, bound for New Orleans, that I had just boarded the Essence Express. A lot of fun, a lot of joy, a lot of power on that plane. So glad that I boarded that flight and got to be part of that. And then when I came here to New Orleans, just about every person that I've met in our hotel lobby, out on the street, right here as we were walking into the convention hall, has been so kind, so generous, and so encouraging. And so I want to say thank you to every one of you for what you do, for having me out here today, giving me a chance to be on this stage in front of you. And at the risk of stating the obvious, I want to say this. I want to acknowledge that African American women are the heart and soul of the Democratic Party. It is on your hard work, your votes, your belief, your power of helping others to believe in what is possible that we've not only elected the candidates that we want to see in office, but we've allowed them to pursue the policies that make this a better country. I can think of no better example of that than the greatest president of my lifetime, Barack Obama. And it wasn't just his election. It was all of us working together to make sure that he could pass health care so that tens of millions of our fellow Americans could be well enough to pursue their full potential. And the greatest economic expansion this country has ever seen, guided by President Obama. It may have something to do with African American women, small business owners who've been growing their businesses at 14 times the average rate in this country, but it has almost nothing to do with Donald Trump and the credit that he seeks to claim for work that was done because of the people here in this room right now. And I'll tell you this, y además, in Texas last year, my friends from Texas who were on that flight from Houston produced a transformative change in our democracy. A state that had ranked 50th in voter turnout before 2018 stood up to be counted. We won more votes than any Democratic contender in the history of the state of Texas. Won independence for the first time in decades. Saw young voter turnout up 200%. And though we did not defeat Ted Cruz, we came awfully close in the pursuit. We saw 17 African American women elected to judicial positions of power in Houston, Texas, literally changing the face of criminal justice in the most diverse city in the United States of America. So I want to tell you, I take from you my inspiration, my guidance, my direction, and from others that we meet along the campaign trail, including a woman that I want to tell you about from South Carolina, whom I met in Charleston, Louise Brown. 50 years ago, in 1969, she helped to lead a strike at the Medical University of South Carolina. She and other African American women were being paid a fraction what men and white employees were being paid, and at the risk of losing their jobs, they struck. And it galvanized the conscience, not just of Charleston, not just of South Carolina, but of the country. On that day in 1969, Coretta Scott King, Ralph Abernathy, and other civil rights leaders appeared there at the strike to add their support, their strength, and their power to those workers. The first public appearance by Coretta Scott King after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Because she understood that this was part of the Poor People's Campaign that her husband had led. And at the end of the day in 1969, those striking workers got better pay, better working conditions, and the ability to organize with their fellow employees. I can only imagine how good Louise Brown felt in 1969 after having the courage of her convictions, winning that victory not just for herself, but for other workers in Charleston and beyond. But imagine her disappointment today when I asked her about working conditions in that same hospital from which she struck 50 years ago. And she tells me that the workers there in some ways have it worse than she did in 1969. That those employees today in this year cannot afford health care in the same facility where they deliver it now. I want to figure out how we make the most of her sacrifice her example and her struggle going forward, how we ensure that it was not in vain, and guarantee that progress continues for everyone in this country and does not grind to a halt or go in reverse under this administration. Some ideas inspired by her and those of you that I've had a chance to meet. What if every working American were paid a true living wage so they didn't have to work a second or a third job? What if we acknowledge the fact that in this year, African American women are making 61 cents on the dollar that white men make? We end discrimination in the workplace, no longer use salary history as a factor in what you are paid going forward, and enshrine the Equal Rights Amendment into the Constitution so there is never a question going forward. And then seizing upon the success, women of color who own small businesses in this country, make sure that we make more capital available to them, radically increase small business lending into these communities, and shift $50 billion of federal procurement away from corporations and to small businesses, half of that reserved for minority-owned and women-owned businesses in this country. What if we made sure that when it comes to healthcare, that we have full, universal, guaranteed, high-quality care for every single American? That means primary health care, mental health care, and every woman making her own decisions about her own body with the access to the care that makes that possible. And in the face of a maternal mortality crisis in America that is 3 times as deadly for women of color, and a disparity in infant mortality that is greater now in 2019 than it was in 1850, 15 years before the abolition of slavery, that we also include the full spectrum of maternal health care, from cervical screenings to doulas and midwives and home health care visits to save the lives of our fellow Americans. But if we're going to have economic justice in this country, if we're going to have health care that really works for every single one of us, we need to return to the example that you've set in this country and in my home state of Texas, and that is making sure that this democracy works. So at the heart of our proposals is a new Voting Rights Act that removes every barrier for every American. No more voting roll purges in Georgia so that Stacey Abrams can become the rightful governor of that great state. No more voter ID laws that are racist in their intent and the way that they are carried out. And same-day and automatic voter registration to bring tens of millions of our fellow Americans into our democracy and into the process. That is how we do justice to the inspiration and the leadership and the guidance that you have provided. I am grateful. Thank you very much.
We actually call the planes soul planes when they're coming to New Orleans. So you got to experience an Essence soul plane.
Best flight of my life.
It was fantastic. So it's been such a wonderful experience to have, tremendous slate of presidential candidates here at the Essence Festival in New Orleans, our 25th anniversary, at the largest live experience in the country. And we're very proud to be here with Mayor LaToya Cantrell, the first female mayor who happens to be a Black woman in 300 years. So it's really a pleasure to hear you say that Black women are the heart and soul of the Democratic Party. Because Black women have over-delivered for centuries, but have been underserved. And you mentioned several issues. There are many of concern. We surveyed 25,000 of our women in our community, and there were other issues also of importance. One, of course, was a woman's right to choose. That not having the right to choose disproportionately impacts women of color, Black women in this country, and also student loan debt. We'd love to hear you talk about those two additional issues that disproportionately impact our community of women.
Thank you, Michelle. I'll tell you from our perspective in Texas, I refer to a maternal mortality crisis that is 3 times as deadly for women of color. That is not unrelated to the fact that our state legislature and our governor has shut down more than a quarter of the family planning clinics in the state of Texas. So it means that safe, legal access to an abortion is effectively and functionally denied, but it also means that cervical cancer screenings, family planning help, the ability to see a provider in a state that has refused to expand Medicaid, healthcare is effectively and functionally denied, and the outcomes are absolutely tragic. It is literally a life and death issue. So as president, not only will I nominate justices to the Supreme Court who understand that Roe versus Wade is a settled law of the land since 1973. Our Department of Justice will be in every single courtroom in every state of the country defending that woman's right to make her own decisions about her own body. We'll work with colleagues in Congress to define this by statute as well. And then we'll do the following. We'll repeal the Hyde Amendment so that regardless of your income or your zip code, you too are going to have access to the full range of reproductive health services in this country. I think it's only when we do that that every woman in America is going to be able to live up to her full potential, be well enough to fulfill her promise. This other issue that we have talked about in terms of access to the best of what America has to offer, and America's access to the true genius of every single American, is the ability to afford higher education. So right now in this country, we have $1.5 trillion in outstanding student loan debt. It's more than all the credit card debt in this country combined. And on average, graduating seniors have about $40,000 on their back, so often unable to repay that. We're seeing about a 10% default rate right now. What if we made higher education affordable for everyone by making college debt-free for middle-income and lower-income families, dedicating billions more to historically black colleges and universities and minority-serving institutions, tying that to teacher training so that we get more teachers in the classrooms who look like the students in front of them. Because one of the other challenges that we face right now is that in a kindergarten classroom, when a child is 4 or 5 years old, they're 5 times as likely to be disciplined or suspended or expelled if they are a child of color versus a white child in the same classroom for the same infraction in front of the same teacher. So let's get more teachers from the communities that are served in the classrooms as well, and make that affordable for them to pursue higher education. And if they already have some of that debt, wipe it clean for their commitment to serving in public service in the classroom. I think those are some of the ways that we meet some of the challenges that women of color face in this country right now.
Yes, and how specifically would those funds get approved through our government? We know it is not always easy to get things done in Washington, D.C. So how will you get it done?
This is part of the magic of the people who are here in this room. I give women of color credit for the electoral victories that we've celebrated. And the pinnacle of those, as I mentioned, was President Barack Obama. But it wasn't just the victory at the ballot box. It was the victory in his pursuit of the policies that made this a stronger, a better, and a healthier country. Learning from that experience, whoever the next president is, no matter how experienced or resourceful or diligent, they will need a movement of people in this country to be able to enact the most ambitious agenda against the greatest set of challenges that we've ever faced, whether it is access to higher education or health care or combating climate change before it is too late, environmental justice, immigration reform. We have our work cut out for us, but it needs all of this country to come together. Not half steps or half measures or half of America, but every single one of us. So this campaign cannot end in November of 2020. It must continue every single day of the next administration to put pressure on those members of Congress to make sure that they come through in these positions of public trust to deliver for our fellow countrymen. And the best way to do that is not just to be involved in campaigns like this one, but in those U.S. House races, those U.S. Senate races, those state House races, those judicial races that I highlighted in Houston, Texas. At every level of government, it's going to take every single one of us doing all that we can to be able to deliver.
Thank you. So, Commissioner,
I can't wait to get in on this one. So, thank you for being here and welcome. You talked a little bit about economic justice, right? The wealth gap, closing the wealth gap. We're acutely aware that until there is economic equality in this country, and until there is economic justice and equal access to the opportunities, our communities will continue to not be as strong as they can be, right? How do you think about, and what are some of the things that you would do that will start to ensure that economic justice, that will start to ensure that those opportunities exist, right? You talked a little bit about investing in HBCUs, a little bit about student debt, but where would you go beyond that?
I'd start with where you're seeing some of the greatest success economically in America right now, and that is women of color-owned small businesses. I mentioned earlier, they're growing at 14 times the rate of the average small business in this country. So in this capitalist economy, let's make sure more capital is available to more of these women who want to grow their businesses or start their businesses in the first place. Our administration will double the size of community development finance institutions, so lending into the community for those who have historically been denied capital in the first place. And I'll give you an example by contrast in my experience. When I was starting a small business 20 years ago, went to the bank, could not get a loan, but my dad, who had equity in his home, was able to borrow against it and then turn around and loan that money to me. That allowed me to hire people, invest in the capital and technology that I needed, and to grow that business. Well, how about in Black America, where you have had a persistent denial of home loans and redlining and access to capital? Making that capital available going forward ensures that this and each successive generation, as I saw in my own family, will have the seed capital for whether it's higher education, technical training, or starting a small business of their own to fulfill their potential and create more job opportunities for more Americans. If we also get rid of disparity in pay by ensuring that, for example, your wage history is not used against you going forward, which captures you in a negative feedback loop, if we guarantee that through the U.S. Constitution, fundamentally your rights cannot be denied based on your gender, then we're going to see greater parity in wages paid out in the economy. And if we go to K through 12 or pre-K through 12 education and address funding gaps we see there, minority-majority schools in this country are underfunded to the tune of $23 billion annually in America. We are never going to get there unless we have equality in funding. Under my administration, we propose a permanent educational fund of $500 billion that will invest to alleviate those disparities so that you have equality in funding, and then you begin to get to equity in education, which means hiring educators who look like the students before them. So if we start at the earliest age, 3 or 4 years old in pre-K, access to higher ed, access to capital in the economy, pay equalization, I then begin to think that our economy is truly going to work for everybody.
Thank you. I think that as you move forward, what I think will be particularly important to this audience is the opportunity to participate in those decisions. I think far too often the decisions get made without our input, gets made without our taking into consideration our own set of circumstances and the unique ways of looking at it and the unique issues that exist in our community. So I would just encourage that as you move forward, that you take that into consideration as you put these policies together. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. We, before we were here today, we were at a climate roundtable in the lower ninth, listening to community leaders talk about some of the challenges that they face from a home by home, neighborhood by neighborhood perspective, and talk about how following Katrina and Rita, billions of dollars poured in to New Orleans, and yet access to affordable housing perhaps worse than ever. Gentrification, a greater challenge today than it was before those storms. And what they told me and what came through loud and clear, just to echo your comments, is if they said to me, if we were at the table when those investment decisions were being made, when the policies were being constructed, the outcomes would have been so much better. So include us at the beginning, not at the end of the conversation.
Thank you very much for being here today. It was a privilege to hear your message, and we look forward to following you on the campaign trail.
Thank you so much, Michelle Richelieu. Thank you so much for that. Thank you all. Very, very grateful.